Hi guys, welcome to Trail Talk. It's episode 2. We're excited to get going here. We're going to talk about UTMB Whistler and the Gary Robbins WAM debacle. I'm joined again by the same guest panelists, Troy, Brian and Ricky. Excited to have those guys back. We had a lot of fun last week. We're going to have 2 segments. Our second segment is going to be a mystery, a little bit of a secret, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be more fun than the UTMB Whistler thing, which has really got under the skin of the community. You guys have been voting in the Instagram broadcast channel. Your takes are going to be discussed. We're also going to check back in with Andy Glaze in SoCal to see how many miles he's run and what are his streaks looking at right now. So excited to hear from Andy. But anyway, let's get on with the show. So this week we're talking about UTMB Whistler and the Gary Robbins WAM event. So I've already gone into a little bit of that in the intro. So Troy, what do you think of this? Have you been following the broadcast channel polls? What's your sort of whole take on this and the various articles that have come out online?
Yeah, so I read Gary's blog. I read the Trail Runner article. I've yet to dive into the I Run Far piece, which I hear is really good. I'm personally still waiting for the Pro Trail Runners Association to kind of take a stand and make at least have some sort of public statement. Me personally, like, this reeks of insight, like, for lack of a better word, like insider trading, like big corporate back dealings. Regardless of what the intention was on both sides, it's really hard for me not to look at the evidence presented and say, through non-action, Vail and Ironman were in cahoots to try to push Gary out in order for those 2 corporate entities to create a partnership, and I would not be surprised if we do not see other events similar to what Ironman is trying to produce in Whistler pop up at other Vail resorts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, good points. I get that you're sympathetic, to the underdogs, the Gary Robbins of the world. But I mean, ultimately, I guess I'm glad that we kind of let a little bit of time go by. The dust has kind of settled. More information's come out. I think I was a little bit more upset on behalf of Gary when it first came out. But the more I think about it, if it was Robbins Gary instead of Gary Robbins, we wouldn't really be even dedicating any time on this podcast. I think because Gary's a bigger figure than most RDs, we're more sympathetic to Gary than the actual event. I also think that there was a big cult waiting just for an event like this to take place to really put UTMB on the stake and light the match and watch it burn. They think of UTMB as a witch, and this does seem like the appropriate stake to put UTMB on now. But it's a good case study. We'll see. I mean, there's GoFundMe pages out for Gary, a lot of sympathy in the marketplace for Gary, and we'll see how big his event becomes, or if people kind of fade away and just accept it as a necessary step towards UTMB building out its bigger plan. So I don't know where I sit on it, but I don't think it's going to be that important as we move throughout 2024. What do you got, Ricky?
Yeah, like you said, I'm going to agree with you on this one. If it was Robbins Gary, I don't think it would have made as big a deal. And then I watched the Free Trail podcast with Gary and Debo, and then I watched a couple of YouTube videos with Phil and My Run and other guys like this, and it was kind of playing it out like that it was all UTMB's fault and they went behind Gary's back. But then I was looking at other podcasts and they were like saying that no, we didn't go behind anyone's back, and by the time it was finished, I was a little bit bored of it all, and I was like going, I don't think it's that big of a deal anymore. Yeah, maybe so if I lived in America, but right here in Europe where I am, I don't hear a lot of noise about it, and I don't think it's going to have a massive effect on 2024 or UTMB next year,
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things here is it feels like it's maybe a North American UTMB problem, and maybe let me just strip that back a little bit, because it used to always rub on me that every time somebody said UTMB, they said UTMB Ironman, because I've always kind of been in the UTMB camp, and it used to rub me the wrong way because of all of the negativity associated with the Ironman brand, and then being a minority partner. But they seem to be a minority partner that's kind of, the tail is wagging the dog, certainly outside of the Mont Blanc event. And this seems to be like the straw that's broke the camel's back, and everyone that was not sure about UTMB, plus everyone that hated UTMB, they've just sort of like, that's enough, this is it, and they've just started all of this hating against UTMB. Whereas I think it's probably Ironman have maybe just taken a step back and let this happen through bad management and poor ethical practices from Vail Resorts. And they just sort of let time pass, and they're the beneficiaries of it anyway. For it to have any sort of impact on the community at large, pro athletes need to boycott UTMB events. And I'm not sure that's going to happen. I don't think enough, if any, have really properly spoke up about this. So I think they hold the key. If the athletes boycott UTMB, UTMB will be forced to pander to them a little bit, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen. What do you think, Troy?
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, you bring up some really good points, and I think it's important to kind of make the distinction between where Ironman is and kind of where Ironman isn't, right? Like in the US with at least North American and South American properties, Ironman has a stake in these events. Ironman owns the events, and they're licensing the UTMB name. So when you look at what just happened, with the Wham and the Vail Whistler situation, like, this is an Ironman play, and I imagine the folks at UTMB probably are over there in Europe going, what happened? Like what actually, what did we do wrong here? And I think it's just really tough because, Brian, you bring up the point, like, hey, if this was Robbins Gary, no one would care. But I think it is really important that it was Gary Robbins, because now, we understand that Ironman has a playbook. They did this in triathlon. They're going to try to consolidate. They're going to try to like exert their will upon the culture and upon the dynamic of races that exist in our sport. And it's important for us as a community to realize that and take heed and understand that now is a time. We're kind of early in this. And I agree, Aaron, with what you said. This was like a kind of a spark situation, and there was a lot of people that were very fearful of this happening, and now it's kind of playing out. And regardless of, like, I mean, if this was done by accident on Ironman's side, like, I find that hard to believe, but man, is it not what needed to happen to be a catalyst so we could, as a community, take action. I think it is really important that the pro side of the sport, the tip of the spear, really needs to kind of align themselves one way or the other. And, we'll see. Ricki, you threw up the dollar signs, and I'm interested to see what happens, because I feel like if we as a community, from the middle of the pack and the back of the pack all the way to the front of the pack, cannot find some sort of alignment to take some of the power back, and I don't mean all the power, but I mean kind of put Ironman in their place and understand, like, hey, we are not to be reckoned with like this. Like, you're not going to do to trail and ultra marathon running or races what you did to triathlon. I think it's really important that we take a stand here and really put a stake in the ground. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I hear you. A lot of superlatives there talking about this, groundswell of UTMB participation. But I mean, I'm here in the United States. I'm in Arizona. I mean, this doesn't even make a ripple of effect on the races that I run. I don't even think I've ran a UTMB race and don't plan on it, not because I'm against it, but just I don't travel that way. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think it has a big impact on a lot of people. directly. I'd be curious to know how many people actually, that we have as listeners, would make travel arrangements differently in spite of this news. Like would you take this action by UTMB in Canada and choose not to run a UTMB race somewhere else in the world, right? I don't know if that's necessarily something a lot of people are prepared to do. The pro athletes, I mean, what options do they have? I mean, Western States is awfully silent. I think they're kind of just doing the Homer Simpson into the bushes right now, acting like they don't have a soft partnership with UTMB, right? I mean, so if Western States is an affiliated UTMB event, we know what UTMB is building out, and they have the biggest mountain ultra in the world. I mean, you could go down and race sub-ultra distance like Golden Series. You could go up to super ultra distance if you wanted to take your talents to a different division. But if you're going to stay in the ultra race distance, you don't have options if you're a competitive athlete. Like that is what it is. It's the landscape and the environment that we've got. What do you got, Ricky? What's your dollar sign saying?
Yeah, like I heard them talking about promoting other races that aren't UTMB races, like in Switzerland or other countries across Europe, in France and that. But honestly, like for me, as a trail runner and let's say a runner that wants like sponsors to look at me or something like that, they're not big enough. I need to do the UTMB races because everyone's trying to get stones to get into a UTMB race. They're not thinking about these other, I don't want to call them Mickey Mouse races, but they're not as popular as UTMB. So I'm not saying they're bad races, they're just not as desirable. And when you have UTMB, you have that desirable race, and they're the races that are going to get more people into them. So yeah, okay, we're talking about a boycott here. We're talking about saying, oh, the pros need to do this, but the pros are been told where to race a lot of the time as well. They've been told you got to be at UTMB, even though you're carrying 6 or 7 injuries. You got to be at UTMB because it's the biggest race of the year. It's the World Cup of trail running, so you got to be here. So it's very hard for a pro athlete to boycott UTMB.
Yeah, and we're already seeing that some of the athletes aren't boycotting. We have in a few weeks the done Ethlon UTMB race in Thailand, and I think Keely Henninger and Hillary Allen have both mentioned that they're competing at that event. So those are the first 2 high-profile names. Obviously, they've been entered and known they're probably going to do these races long before this thing happened. But still, that putting something out into the world that they're competing at around this time when this topic is hot shows that athletes are just going to continue on. I think where we're going to see maybe the biggest boycott is it just localized into this Whistler event. Volunteers, especially if Gary goes ahead and puts on this competing event. It feels like the North American ultra community are going to get behind that. There's talk of maybe Aravipa doing a live stream. Single Track have talked about it would be cool to be there and put out some content and raise the profile of this event in its first year. People are encouraging others to sign up for this event whenever it becomes available. And there's talk about Gary has to make sure that they've got a big enough permit for big numbers. So time will tell over the next 12 months to see what way this comes around. And Brian, you mentioned the GoFundMe. I think I looked at that yesterday, and it was about $7,000 at this point. So I think Gary had messaged Dominic Grossman and asked could he use the money to buy a booth at UTMB Expo to promote his events. So yeah, I honestly think Gary's even losing steam with this as well, unfortunately. But we'll just have to see. But let me also just reference, we ran 2 polls in the broadcast channel. The first one, I'm just reading it here. Have you heard enough about UTMB Whistler, or should the debate continue? And we had 46 votes said it's time for action, not words. 14 votes for I've heard enough. and a couple that have said they'd never paid much attention to it anyway. And then we ran a second one, which was, will pro athletes stand with the community and boycott UTMB in 2024? And we had 53 votes for no and 9 for yes. So, I mean, I think that kind of is similar to our opinion here. You know, we would like UTMB to do better. We would like them to maybe pay a little bit for what has happened, but ultimately we don't see any long progressive change happening. Definitely not globally, potentially in the North America only. Yeah, but also I just wanted to make a point on a lot of these events like Canyons and Speedgoat. There has been changes whenever they have been taken over, and there's been course changes. Carl's coming to the end of his time as race director, so you know, how are they ever going to put on UTMB Whistler with somebody drafted in from Ironman to run the event with potentially no volunteers or inexperienced trail volunteers? How are they going to put on a successful event? So I think they're going to have a lot of trouble in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I think we stub our toes or stumble on this whole conversation, especially Troy. When you think of UTMB, you think of it as a singular organization, and I think the way I look at it is more like a McDonald's, type of corporation that franchises out these small races locally. Yeah, if you have your local McDonald's with some bad outbreak rats or something, like it's not going to get business, right? But they're going to sell a billion hamburgers overseas and all throughout the rest of the United States. So yeah, we've got a sour taste in the Canadian marketplace towards UTMB now, but it's not going to affect much, if anything, elsewhere. And this whole rally cry around the Trail Runner Association pro thingamajig that I don't even know what it is, because they aren't really that present. They don't carry any clout. I don't think what their statement says will do anything. They're not some storied unionized players union that can actually muscle their way around and tell UTMB or any other race organizer what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. We're planting a flag in some very soft ground right now, and I think UTMB knows they have the leverage. Certainly Ironman knows they have the leverage, and I just think people don't necessarily like that it's being done brashly in this particular circumstance, but I don't know. I just think we have the wrong context and framework on how we're looking at this situation.
Yeah, and for me, it's just Iron Man is Iron Man. They get away with a lot of shit, and I just think we just need to keep, let's say, a close eye on what they're doing. I'm not saying it's going to have a massive effect, but it'd be just good for us as trail runners in the trail running community to keep a close eye on what Iron Man are going to start doing in the future, if they are going to start pulling fast ones, because they've done some crazy, crazy things in triathlon over the last few years, and they still seem to get away with it. Even when it is something that's their fault, they always kind of say, "Oh, we didn't mean to do it," or "I'm really sorry," and they seem to get away with it. And the following year, they're back, and they're back in business and better than ever. And there's more people going around with tattoos on their calves. So, we just need to keep a close eye on it. That's all. And I think that's all we can do for now.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not totally with you on the pro trail runners take, Brian. They don't have leverage, but they do have communication with UTMB. They are sitting down, they're at the table, they're speaking to them, and a lot of the high-profile athletes are members. So I think maybe they don't have an awful lot of leverage because they're so new to it. It's such a new organization, but at least it's a unified voice and they're talking to them, and it'll certainly be interesting to see what comes out of that. Maybe nothing, but maybe something as well. But it'll be interesting to find out. Anyway, guys,
I mean, I think. Oh, sorry. One last thing, Aaron. I think it speaks volumes, though, that this Trail Runner Association already had this on the agenda and allowed an entire meeting to go by without addressing it. So the fact that they didn't prioritize their response and organize their voice at that particular time, that speaks volumes as to where their organization or priority on this particular topic is. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but they have had an opportunity to organize their voice. They missed it, and again, more time's gone by.
Yeah, and I think just for clarity on that, that there was a 90-minute meeting with the association last Monday, and they didn't have time to get it onto the agenda, and they are going to, or they have scheduled another call. So I totally agree. I was really disappointed whenever I heard that from Krim Malcolm on X. Yeah, not a good sign, and a disappointing sign. But anyway, we've put this one to bed now. This is the end of UTMB Whistler. Let's sit back and see what action comes from it. I'm sure the debate will continue, but let's go now and check in with our mate Andy Glaze in Southern California.
Andy Glaze here, smiling from the west coast of California. Just finished my 191st week in a row of running over 100 miles. Like most West Coast runners right now, we're just all sitting around trying to figure out how to destroy UTMB based on their disastrous PR blunder involving their race in Whistler, Canada. Hopefully, if we keep up the pressure, they can give us some sort of meaningful response that wasn't written by ChatGPT or their corporate lawyers. But probably not, because they're a soulless corporation. My punk rock roots will continue to fight and be loud about this issue, as I hope they will be for you. And no UTMB for me this year, even though I am already in. Back to you.
All right, guys, let's have a little bit of fun with this one. Now we've gotten over the UTMB Whistler and all that whole sort of stuff. So Jim versus Remi at Marathon de Mont Blanc. It hasn't happened. It might never happen, but I think it would be a fun one. Remi is really on the ascendancy. He just keeps getting better and better each year. He also has this sort of similarity to Jim in the sense that he fails, but he comes back stronger. And Jim's really versatile. We've seen him do a VK earlier on this year with a really solid time. So, yeah, what do you think, Troy? Jim or Remi? Who would you put your money on at the Marathon de Mont Blanc?
Yeah, so it would be a coin flip, honestly, because you just don't know what Jim and what Remi you're going to get. But let's just assume that both these guys bring the A game, right? Because I think each one of them can kind of not show up as their best selves, depending on the competition. But man, I'm having a hard time betting against Jim right now. I think you make a really good point. Remi is on the ascent. I think Remi needs to add a little more volume to his training in order to really just smash things. And I think Jim is there. And I think the only thing Jim has to do differently is just do a little bit of those sharpening things in order to get that marathon speed. But I mean, at this point, it's really hard to bet against Jim. I think he climbs really, really well, and he has the leg speed to do it. And if it's a head-to-head, just those two guys on the course, I don't know, man. I would see Jim being able to dig pretty deep there. So, Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I might shock a few people here on this podcast and across the world, but I don't know, man. I think it's hands down Remi. And I don't even think it's really close. Maybe in America, you might see Jim favored a little bit more because it's an American classic. But clearly, on the global scale, Remi has a more elegant, smooth finish. You guys are kind of confused. We're comparing cognac to Jim Beam bourbon, right, Remi? Did I just screw up the? We're actually going to go out and have a 20-minute conversation comparing the trail runner Remi Bonnet to the American badass Jim Walmsley. I mean, guys, come on. It's not even close. I thought I'd have a little fun with it in the beginning just to entertain a little hubris, right? But, I mean, Jim Walmsley, hands down, would take this. I don't care what course it's on. In fact, they've actually lined up at 3 courses before. I did my research, did my homework. If you remember 2019, Sierras and all, Jim Walmsley, what place did he come in? Notes say here 3rd, Remi 8th. 2020, Golden Trail Series. Twice they raced, right? Volcanoes Trail, Anzores. Jim Walmsley again, 5th compared to Remi in 11th. Walmsley second compared to Remi in eighth. Right, so that's 0 for 3 in head-to-head matchups, albeit, a few years old. Remi's probably shown some growth, but so was our boy Jim Walmsley. And the final nail in the coffin, Walmsley's already dropped a Bonnet at Western States. His pacer, James Bonnet, got dropped. Remi would be no different. So drop the mic. Jim Walmsley hands down over Remi. What do you got there, Ricky? You going to save your boy over there?
I'd like to save Remi, but I'm a Jim Walmsley fan. And I think, Remi probably would push him tight over that course, over that distance. But I'm still a massive Jim Walmsley super fan. I think he can go the distance. I think he's got the leg speed. He showed it in the World Champs a couple of years ago. And like you said, he's beaten. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I can't even back Remi on this one. I've got to go for Jim all day long.
I can't believe this. Now, I feel like there's three people ganging up on me, and you're also assuming that I'm also going for Remi and not Jim. Let me put it into context here. This is an open debate. I haven't declared my position yet, but I think it would be closer than what you're saying, Brian, for sure. 2019, was it not maybe 2020? It was the Golden Trail World Series finale in the Azores. And yeah, Remi had a really bad final, but Remi has had poor years. He's never nailed Sierre-Zinal. He said that is one race that he wants to win. Probably going to be really hard for him to win it because of the Africans that are now competing there. But I think on a course like Marathon de Mont Blanc, 42 Ks, around 3,000 meters of vert, I think he's got a good chance. He's experienced on that course. Jim isn't. Jim takes a while to nail it. Remi has the record on it. So I think Remi could take him. But I know it would be a good race. I know it would be a good fight. And I'm not saying that Remi beats him every time. I think it's very course specific, terrain, technicality. These are all things that Jim takes a while to get used to. So, yeah, listen, if they lined up at the Mammoth 26K, buttery West Coast trails, I think Jim probably takes him there. He's got the leg speed, as you said, Ricky, but technical Marathon de Mont Blanc, big climbs, big technical descents. I don't know. I would be hard to go against Remi after the season that he's had. So, what do you think, Troy?
I mean, are we talking about like expat Jim or like 2022 Western States Jim? I think Jim's got all that experience living in France. I think he knows what it means to be fast on technical trails. I would say, like, if we were having this conversation, I'd be interested to see how we would all think about this conversation, like, say, 3 years from now. Like, if we're talking about Jim versus Remi, give Remi 3 more years of putting volume underneath him. Remi is definitely on the rise, but like Jim is at the peak of his game, I think, and at the height of his powers. It's really tough. I really do still think, if you're making that coin flip and the best of both of those athletes show up, I think Jim still edges him out. Just from the fact that, like, and I know we're talking about flat road here, but like Jim qualified for Olympic trials with a half marathon time. Like, the guy is fast, like, and can be really fast. And I guess if you can translate that to specificity, I don't necessarily know enough about Remi to know like what his, what his marathon times are, or what his short distance times are, but man, it's hard to beat that. And I know Jim knows how to throw down a VK. If we were talking about Remi and Jim versus VK, I think it's real. It's hard not to bet against Remi just because of the experience. And but at the same time, it's just not what Jim does. But I do know that the one thing Jim does do is runs fast at any distance from the half marathon up to the 100-miler. So I think he has the range. And I think he puts in the volume and the work to show up pretty much at any distance. So.
Yeah, I hear you, Troy. And good points, Aaron. I'm not here to say that Remi is by any means anything other than world class, right? I mean, the fact that we're even having this conversation puts him in rarefied air. But in a two-man race, I don't care how close you are. If you're not first, you're last. And I think that's the position that we're all defaulting to for Remi versus Jim at this stage in their careers. I mean, Remi is a sub-ultra king. I mean, he's shown flashes of brilliance at the sub-ultra distance over these last couple of years. And I mean, the race distance that we're talking about, the race specifically lends itself to cater more towards Remi's strengths. But I think from a mindset perspective, I don't know much about Remi's mindset. Jim has already built a legacy on kind of having that grit. He goes in and digs things out. He's a dog. You know, I see that being still critical at the marathon distance, especially on that type of a race course. And I think he could really play mind games with Remi if it was just a two-man race. So it would be fun. You know, it'd be one of those ones that you'd want to pay-per-view and sit down and get some popcorn and watch it with your boys. So what do you got, Ricky?
Yeah, it'd definitely be something to watch. It'd be unbelievable to watch the two of them throw it down. But I think what you have to look at is Jim can hurt. Jim has learned how to hurt so much over the last few years. And I think there, even this year in UTMB, he was coming down from La Flégère after battling it out all day, all night, and he was still throwing down like 5-minute miles. He was like running at 3:45 per kilometer coming down on that last stretch. That, like after 170k, that's mental, mind, body, everything, strength wise. And I think people will look at Remi as like, yeah, he's the short distance trail specialist. But like, that's not enough. Like, that's not enough because he is specific to those short trails, but he blows up a lot of the time. He blows up a lot of the time. Whereas, and I think if it went head to head, mano a mano, grit to grit, I think Jim would just have enough thickness, as I'm going to say, thickness to beat Remi all day long, I think, you know?
Yeah, I mean, good points. Jim has definitely learned through failure about getting tough, and he perseveres and he comes back and he learns from his mistakes. And Remi definitely has blown up plenty of times. I think he has lent on his climbing to make up for some lack of speed in previous years, but he's been working on his speed only maybe for, I think maybe since last off season to improve that. And after doing that, look at the season that he's had. So yeah, I don't know, interesting. But even this past year, Jim raced a 42k. I think it was called La Frigon Roche, 42k, 2,900 meters of climbing. Did it in 4:02. So it was in the Alps. It was quite close to Beaufort, where he's living. And Remi's time at the Marathon de Mont Blanc is 3:35. It's 43k with just over 2,400 meters of climbing. So I mean, arguably, Jim didn't have as much competition in that smaller race. But I think what I'm trying to highlight here is it would be close. You know, we're talking about two of the best, if not the best. So it would be really good. And then going back to the Azores race, the people that beat Jim, yes, Jim beat Remi in some of those races, in all of those races, I should say. But the people that beat Jim have also improved. You know, Fred Tranchard, Brad, or what do you call the guy, the Polish guy, Pododinsky, I think is how you pronounce his name. Steen, Angermundsen, and you know, a couple of these people that are at the top. Elisine, who won the finale a few weeks ago, and they all beat Jim then. So yeah, I'm just going to come back to the thing that we're probably all going to agree on, and that is that this would be a close battle, and it would be a fun battle, and one that we'd probably all pay to see. Will we ever see it? I don't know.
You know, maybe this would be an opportunity for Gary to host this head-to-head matchup and really draw some attention to the new race that he's planning up there. It'd be fascinating. So if you're watching, listening, Gary, this might be a brilliant idea to get some good eyes and attention. Why don't you pay some prize pool money to get there, some attendance money for Jim and Remi to you know, fulfill this fantasy that we're sitting here spending 20 minutes talking about.
Yeah, let's put that GoFundMe to good use. and
Yes, sir.
and stick it up as a prize purse. What do you got, Ricky?
Yeah, like I'd love to see Jim Walmsley go and do the Golden Trail Series. I'd love to see him do that because, to be honest,
Yeah.
like I know this is right, Remi versus Jim, and that's what we're talking about. But I actually think that Stian beats Remi. I think Stian beats Remi. I think Stian took a step back this year, and Remi kind of moved into his position. I think Stian is almost going to be. I think he's pretty much the king in the Golden Trail Series at the minute because he's improved all his whole game. His uphill, his downhill, and his flat running is just it's gone above and beyond. So I think it'd be more like I'd love to see Jim move into the Golden Trail Series and throw it down with all of the boys and see how he got on, you know?
I love the idea. I love that idea, Ricky, of the specificity. Because like Jim, he's a I don't want to call him a 100-mile specialist, but that's what he's put a lot of focus into over the last, like, say, 4 years of his career. And yeah, he was dabbling in the Golden Trail for a little bit, did a couple events, but I mean, watching Jim get specific in something means you're going to see the best Jim possible. And it'd be interesting to see how he could do, stacking a bunch of marathon and shorter distance technical trail races that the Golden Trail offers. I want to say I would pay for that pay-per-view. Like I'll pop the popcorn for everybody too. Like I think that would be amazing to kind of see that level. And I was bantering on LinkedIn with David, one of the owners of Ultra Sign Up, and they've got like slippery stair climbing finals comp championships on ESPN. Like, why can't we get trail running on ESPN? I think ESPN2. I think it's ridiculous that you can watch the Cornhole World Series and the Pillow Fighting World Series on ESPN2, but you can't watch trail running. And I think this could be the event that, from a pay-per-view audience or that kind of, get the right endemic sponsors to kind of put up the money to drop the coverage and make an offer that ESPN can't refuse. I think this would be a really cool thing to see. And I think the exhibition style, I think, is what could bring a wider audience of, like, it kind of goes back to these old school endurance exhibitions that used to happen, where it's not necessarily a race. It's like a race with two men racing against each other. They're both considered the best. Like, someone's going to prove themselves out here. And I think there's something like really powerful. And I think there could be a big draw there. So, yeah, I don't know. If anyone knows, anyone out there besides Gary, if you know anyone at ESPN, let's make this happen, so.
We do have, the Golden Trail series is on Eurosport. Do you get Eurosport in the States?
I imagine we could try.
So, it's like the biggest sports channel across Europe, but not a pay-per-view thing. But yeah, I think it would be an interesting one. It would be a big seller. Ricky, what you're saying about Stian, I love that guy. That he is such a dog. I love how he climbs, and you're dead right in the sense that he's taken his focus away from Golden Trail. I think he's got a little bit older. Stroke, he's done that, and he's part of this group of athletes that are stepping up in distance. Like Thibaut Baronian doing the Nice 100K. We've had Stian doing the UTMB, some of the UTMB races, and course record as well at OCC a couple of years ago. So yeah, I think he's done his Golden Trail scholarship, and now he's moved on, as they all do. And Jim's obviously at the pinnacle, the 100-mile mountain distance. The UTMB, what it's all about. So it'll be many years before we would ever see those guys up at the 100-mile, even if we ever would.
I just want to say, Brian, I'm taking that to be a dog for our American audience. I think that's a good thing. I think in America, I know there's a lot of differences between the Brits and the Americans, but like, if you call someone a dog here, it can either like he's your homie or like, he's just not the best. So I just want to clarify that for anyone in the audience. And Wolfie, I know you're kind of a dog there, buddy. So, I guess that's a good thing for you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we get the meaning of dog. He's the person has a bit of fight in them. I think is where we're coming from there.
Absolutely.
What's the poll say?
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, so we ran the broadcast channel poll, which was who would win between Remi and Jim in a Marathon de Mont Blanc, and we had a 55% vote for Remi. So initially it was 80% Remi, 20% Jim, and then as the sun moved around the globe and Americans got out of bed and seen this crazy poll, they started clicking Jim, and it balanced out. So there was good participation, but 55% Remi, which I think really, again, these broadcast polls are telling us that we're on the button. In our opinion, is what the community thinks too, that it would be a great fight, a fun fight, and nobody knows who would win. But some people are like, yeah, I think Remi. Some people are like, yeah, Jim. So yeah, fun one.
I think that vote sways to Remi because of the Golden Trail Series, and people just see Remi doing a lot shorter races, and they forget how fast Jim actually is. You know, they kind of see Jim doing the 100-milers, and he's banging them out, and they just kind of forget that he's a rocket ship.
Oh yeah, he would be at the top of whatever he's doing, hands down.
I think this poll just shows that when it was launched and went live in Europe, all the lads were in the pubs in a little sudsy when they were casting their votes. Americans were wide-eyed, drinking their coffee, of sound mind, critical thinking. I think that's what this shows here. So we need to change the time that these things launch or something, because we're getting a little skewed votes here from these polls. We're 0 for 3 from at least Wolfie's point of view.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that because, these polls, they don't run for 24 hours, so people can vote when they're on coffee, they can vote when they're on beer, and I think we get a good reflection of the members in the channel. So listen, guys, that was a fun one. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll be back soon for episode 3. See you later. Well, what did you think of the episode? We appreciate you sticking to the end. UTMB Whistler, let us know what you think about it down in the comments. And also the more fun subject, Jim versus Remi. Yeah, it's a fun one. Let us know who you think would win. I think the comments might be evenly split. Come on, Euros, get your votes in for Remi. Anyway, guys, we appreciate you making it to the end. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with a friend, get the word out there. Trail Talk is here. We're having fun with it. We'll see you in episode 3. Peace.